Hey guys, this is Shane here from Echo Soundworks, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can make a MIDI guitar sound more realistic and authentic. So this can be one of the more difficult things for a producer who doesn't have any knowledge of guitar to pull off or to do. Anytime we release guitar content, whether it's a free pack or it's guitar loops or samples in a paid product, we get asked a lot of questions about how we made the guitars. And the answer is almost always it's a real guitar. It's just processed or chopped and manipulated typically. But the person who usually asks that question gets a little bummed out because they're like, oh, I don't play guitar. Do you know of any good guitar libraries that you can use? Well, the answer to that question is there's a lot of great guitar libraries and guitar sounds out there, but it's really important that you use those tools correctly. It's the chef, not the kitchen in this instance. And I know that sounds cliche, but I'm going to prove it in this video. We're going to look at a few different sources and we're going to recreate a guitar loop using a guitar library and see if we can get it to sound good or realistic and authentic like the real guitar counterpart. So let's check that out now. All right, so that was the real guitar loop. Now we're going to recreate that with a fairly basic contact library, and its dry sound sounds like this. So as we showcase some of these tips and tricks in the video, we're going to add that to the guitar you just heard, and by the end of the video, it might even sound better than the real guitar. All right, so the first step is to actually think ahead to the ultimate sound that you're after, right? Think about the light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of producers make the mistake of working with the wrong VST or sample library, and it faces them with an uphill battle to get the sound they're after. So I'm going to run through this really quick. There's 3 tiers of authenticity and realness in terms of sample libraries or VSTs with guitar. There's the type of library that's deep, multi-sampled, hundreds, maybe even thousands of samples, and it sounds as realistic as you can get. Take, for instance, this UVI library. It's called Sunbird. It sounds incredible. Check it out. Right, sounds like a real guitar, pretty close to it. So you even have access to those nuanced, subtle sounds that I mentioned in the intro, the things that happen in between the notes that you fret, right? Fret noise, knocks, dead strings, all that sort of stuff. So that's tier 1. Tier 2 is going to be things like Omnisphere or Nexus, or things that are multi-sampled but not hundreds of samples. They're going to have multiple velocity layers, maybe even a basic round robin. Now the third tier is going to be something like a synth, maybe a basic sampler or something like Simpler in Ableton. So synths like Serum or Electra X or even Anna 2. For instance, here's a patch from our pack, the X Keys. It's one of the bonus guitar patches. It's called Anna Nylon. It's like a hybrid nylon sound. So if I was going for like a Juice WRLD or a trap type beat and I wanted that kind of plastic sounding guitar, I would use something like this over that UVI synth or that UVI sample library. All right, so moving into step 2, we're going to mainly be focusing on electric guitar content in this video because the acoustic guitar libraries, if you get a good library, it's not as hard to get a good sound, and you can kind of skip step 2 and you can go to the 3rd or 4th step. So if you're working with an electric guitar, step 2 is going to be in that library or whatever it might be, turn off any amp settings that are there and get a dry, raw sound. Hopefully it's just coming from the pickup. And then what you want to do is you want to load up an amp sim or amp simulation software. Things like Guitar Rig, IK Multimedia Amplitude. One of my personal favorite ones is THU Overloud and Line 6 Helix. And you want to run the guitar sample library VST into that sound. So to highlight this, check us out. This is the simple contact library that we'll be using for the remainder of the video. Sounds like this, and it's basically its dry setting. Okay, it's not a bad sound, but it's not a super rich sounding guitar. Here's that same guitar with an amp sim applied to it, and I'm using THU Overloud. And I have a bunch of different, I have some effects, I have an amp, a cab, an EQ, and some reverb. Check out the difference. It's night and day, right? So that's step 2. If you're working with electric guitar, load up an amp sim. Now you might be thinking, oh shit, I don't have an amp sim. Well, you probably do in your DAW. Ableton has the amp and cab. Logic has the amp designer. It's not that uncommon to have access to these tools, right? It's in their amp designer, and you even have a pedal board as well in Logic, which is incredible. So the tools are probably there. If you have access or you have Native Instruments Complete, you're probably going to have Guitar Rig as well. All right, so step 3 is to think like a guitarist and think like a guitar. You might be thinking, how am I supposed to do that? Well, it's not as hard as it sounds. So for instance, the lowest note you can play on a standard tuned guitar is going to be E. Can't go lower than that, right? So obviously if you're playing in a lower octave, it's not going to be as authentic or real. Now on top of that, another simple idea or concept is that on a guitar, you can only ever play a maximum of 6 notes at a time, essentially. And those are typically going to be bar chords. And bar chords have a very specific sound. So if you don't want a bar chord sound, don't play, more than 3 or 4 notes on your keyboard. So obviously don't play two-handed chords with 7, 8 notes. It's not going to sound like a real guitar. Now, expanding on that, taking a little bit further, is you want to try to voice your chords like an actual guitar. The piano and guitar are obviously very different instruments, but the way that a lot of the basic chords are laid out, even in root position, they differ. Same notes, different order. It makes a big difference. All right, so let's go back to that UVI library that I love called Sunbird, and I'm going to play a E major chord how I would on a piano, which is E, G sharp, B, and E. And let's play it all together. It doesn't sound natural. It's very dissonant. It's because I'm playing multiple notes that I shouldn't be able to play on a guitar at the same time on my E string. Now let's actually voice this like a real guitar, which is going to be E, B, E, G sharp. Now it sounds like a real guitar. So obviously, if that first version of the chord makes this library sound like shit, you can imagine what it's going to do to a lesser library, like the Contact one that you're using, or maybe lesser being the less authentic and real and deep sample library. So that's a huge thing to be aware of. Now, if we go back to this guitar that we looked at before, I'm choosing notes that make sense for a guitar. And this actually shows you on the guitar, which I like. Right, so this is a very easy, simple chord to play on guitar. That's why it sounds authentic and real. Now, I could spread this out. That's also authentic sounding as well. But if I start to do something like this, right, now that starts to get weird. I have 2 notes being played on the same string, essentially, and you can't do that on a guitar. So just things like that. And if you're thinking, well, how am I supposed to know this? Well, here's what I suggest doing. Play in the chord progression that you want. Maybe it could follow a bass line or however you set up your chords in your song. And then just do a quick Google search on how to play those chords on a guitar, and you'll see the notes in the order that they should be in. And then you just got to drag your MIDI around to fit that order. All right, so step 4 is kind of like a step 3B, I guess. It's to think about the physics of the guitar. And we talked about this when we looked at the real guitar, and that's that strumming pattern, right? If we go back to this UVI library that I played with this passage right here, I was mimicking a strumming sound. So what I did was I made sure that not every note hit at the exact same time. And you can do down-up patterns with this, which is pretty cool. So for instance, this right here is all down, 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 down. We could change this to down, up, up. And I think I actually have that with that and a 2-patch from our pack, the X keys. So I have a stagger here, which allows this kind of strumming sound to happen. Here's the first note that I'm hitting. Here's a second note, and then there's the third. And I can even change the velocity of the first note to be a little bit heavier than the last note because I'm strumming down. So this is typically going to get more of the force of my pick. Now this next chord is a good example of an up strum. The high note is being strummed first. Right, and you can vary the timing of these. They don't have to be consistent. Some can be a little bit slower, a little bit faster. Right, so we could draw this one out, make it a little bit slower, even. Right, that's starting to get us that strummed sound. Now, combine that with the fact that I voiced this like an actual guitar. Even though it's a fairly synthesized sounding guitar, it still sounds authentic enough to be in a lot of different genres of music. Now, if you couple that idea with something like the UVI library or our Contact library, you're going to get a really realistic sound. So if we go back to our guitar, our electric guitar, you can see here that not every note is starting right on grid. There's a little bit of kind of a stagger to some of the notes, just like you'd get with a guitar. Now, kind of a bonus tip here. You see this long, quiet note? Sometimes when you're strumming on a guitar, a note rings out before you switch frets, and it rings out quietly because it's kind of like a casualty of the, of what you played, right? You're not like actively strumming it. So that's something that I'm doing here is I have a very low velocity note, so it's very quiet. It's just kind of ringing out. It's the note that I played here. It'd be very hard to play this passage on the guitar. This note right here, and then mute it, right? So because this is MIDI, this isn't gonna ring out, the whole time. I could have it go here, but now because it's a higher velocity, it's gonna ring out a little bit too much. So that's why I went with this option. Now this is based off of the library that you use. This just worked with this library. All right, so that's gonna sum up the video. If you guys have any questions or comments, post those and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And for any of you who have a go-to kind of all-time favorite guitar sample library or preset in a synth, drop a comment and let us know what you're using and what you think works the best. If you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, please do that. The support really does help and it really does mean a lot. If you guys do subscribe, consider smashing that notification bell so you get an update when we release a new video. All right, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.